I'm going to talk about how the FBI has swooped into Los Angeles. This is another one of my pieces of evidence that even if you're not happy with the situation in the Middle East, a Donald Trump in the White House as president right now is 150 million times better than the alternative that we would have had. And I think most of us would say that. But this is another indication that we are having some effect out west, because would this have happened under a Biden or an Obama administration? I don't think so. And the president is very sensitive, obviously, to this sort of situation. Clearly, he feels as though Spencer Pratt has had an election stolen from him. I think objectively, the word stolen is not necessarily correct, because the way that the election laws are written in California, it's perfectly legal for you to have universal mail-in ballots, and it's perfectly legal for you to count them in perpetuity until you get the outcome that you want. So that's what they do there. That's why I have said in past videos, it isn't as though there's this elections system in California that functions the way that most people think is sane or legal in most other states. It's that it's been codified. The rigging was codified, and it's not illegal. It's not scam. It's not fraud. Now, this, on the other hand, you could say is fraud, because federal election probes are a step toward restoring faith in voting. So some stakeholders in LA have exploited homeless voters and lax voting rules to entrench their power. No kidding. Now the Trump administration is investigating. I don't know that I have ever, and as a native Californian, George Bush was in the White House. I don't remember ever another president being interested in how California votes, even a Republican, because that was always, 54 electoral votes. You would think we used to be a red state. You would think that the Republicans would want to look into that and figure out how that happened and perhaps try to do something about it so that we could get those 54 electoral votes. But apparently, none of the neocons cared all that much to figure out how that was happening. So now the Trump administration is investigating. Yeah. There's a homeless guy. Plainclothes federal agents spread through Skid Row this week to explore possible election fraud, including reports that homeless people were paid to complete voting forms, forge signatures, and cast votes for left-wing candidates for mayor. So they were given a choice. From what I understand, they were given a choice of Karen Bass or Nithya Raman. I don't guess they really heard of Spencer Pratt, but even if they weren't given that choice. Here's your $4, here's your $2, here's your $5, and we need you to fill this out. We need you to sign it. Even if it's a smiley face, we'll go ahead and just initial it. And that's what they were doing. You can't do that. It's illegal. I don't care if it is a state or city level election. That is illegal no matter where you are. Once again, LA's top federal prosecutor, Bill Asali, has done great work probing allegations of fraud that state and local officials have scant incentive to address. Scant incentive. That is so true. Investigating alleged Skid Row voting bribes, along with other claims of election fraud in California, are a key step forward restoring public trust in Golden State elections. It's just true. Most people feel so, you just feel demoralized. You don't feel like you can go and vote in a voting center in person, at least in California. In Washington, you can't even do that. They don't even have voting centers. It's all vote by mail in Washington. But at least in California, you can show up to a ballot box or to a voting center. You can cast your vote in person. But at that point, it's kind of like you still know that they can count votes until they get the number that they want. And I can't blame Democrats for that. Who do I blame? Neocon Republicans who basically sold out the state one piece at a time for their own self-serving agendas. They were greedy, feckless, and squishy, and they didn't care. They didn't care. This is a state who has had Ronald Reagan as their governor. We used to be solid red. I say we because I'm a native, but it's just what it's become is just a hollow shell of its former self. Since the June 2nd primary, California has been a global laughingstock for its lax guardrails on voting, ban on voter ID, slow system of late vote counting. Nithya Raman had a 43,000 count vote drop just for her, like 2 or 3 days after the election. An anything goes election process that's so sloppy, it's hard to tell where the chaos ends and the fraud might begin. Meanwhile, true to form, the LA City Council is plotting to make things worse. Zealot left councilman Hugo Soto Martinez led a council majority to advance a plan to let non-citizens, including illegal immigrants, vote in LA elections. An insane proposal that would erase what few voting controls are left, dilute citizens' voices, and deepen distrust of a broken electoral system. After the June election, the California Post found thousands of homeless voters registered to vote at shelters where they were not living, including one shelter with no beds. It's fair to wonder what happened to the thousands of ballots that were mailed to those locations. They have ballot harvesting. It's completely legal in California. Given Sacramento's reckless policy of papering the state with ballots, with no controls on who returns them. The big difference in the 2024 election from 2020, everybody knows this. Objectively, you have to agree. The reason I was fairly certain that they couldn't do what they did in 2020 was because of some of the voter integrity endeavors across all of the states, including Tennessee, but we didn't really have, we were a red state and we went for President Trump. But there were states like Wisconsin, some of those swing states that I think Ohio completely circumvented its own state constitution to implement universal mail-in ballots because of COVID. So knowing that they didn't have wholesale access to all of these mail-in ballots that would just be floating around out there, I was fairly certain that they wouldn't be able to hijack another presidential election, and thank God they weren't able to. And then on top of that, people were just ready for it, and we showed up en masse at the polls. And as President Trump likes to say, it was made too big to rig, and that's exactly what happened. It says the feds should investigate all of this and more. And I really think that they are. I think they should, but I'm fairly certain that now we're going to get some results. And Sacramento should clean up the system. Among other changes, California should send mail-in ballots only to voters who request them. So basically more like absentee, require each voter to submit his or her own ballot, require voter ID. When you go to the polls in California, you can show them your Costco card. I don't even think you have to do that. I don't even think you have to show them anything that proves you are who you are. So anyway, it's ludicrous that California counties continue to process ballots for a month after an election, and that's the bottom line. That really is the bottom line. So I'm really hopeful, and again, it's just one more piece of evidence that I have that proves. So here's my talking points for story 3, and I have the New York Post article in the description. And I encourage everybody to go read it. But federal investigators are examining allegations that homeless individuals were paid to register and vote in Los Angeles. We know that there's already been one woman that was adjudicated for it. Critics argue California's election system has been structured in a way that prioritizes ballot collection and turnout over transparency and voter confidence. Yes, because why? They don't care if you're happy. They don't care if you have confidence in it. All they care is that they win. For years, conservatives have argued that election integrity concerns were ignored, dismissed, or labeled conspiracy theories. Exactly. The significance of this story is that federal authorities are now investigating the allegations rather than immediately dismissing them. Again, do you think that would happen under a Barack Obama administration or a Joe Biden administration or even a George Bush administration? I don't believe that it would. So again, we're seeing things happening. Are they huge things? Are they things that are gonna, like, are we having tribunals and sending people to Guantanamo Bay? No, we're not. But these things are happening that would not be happening otherwise, I don't believe. So again, another reason to stop being black-pilled if you are. Whether the allegations are ultimately proven or not, which I think they will be, the larger story is that election integrity concerns are finally being taken seriously. Many conservatives believe that if Donald Trump were not in the White House, and I am one of those, investigations like this would never happen in the first place. And I don't care who you are, you have to agree with that. You have to agree with that. If it weren't for President Trump, if we had a President Kamala Harris right now, do you think any of this would be happening? What do you think the world would look like if she were in the White House right now instead of Donald Trump? But those are all reasons why Republicans should not be black-pilled. Conservatives should not be black-pilled, because we do have a president that I do believe cares about our country. We're getting some stuff done. It's kind of flying under the radar. You just really need to know where to look. And I'm going to do everything I can to help you see it. That is my goal here at Still Not Canceled, where we question everything, especially the narrative. My name is Kelly Jackson. I would love it if you would like and subscribe and join the community. I appreciate you, and I will see you again soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.